So, lipstick on a flying pig, how not to design a modern API over legacy systems. And there's a meta thing here, because basically these are like 10-year-old slides. So this is 10-year-old tech that someone asks me to run again. So this is like 10 years ago style, so these are evidently slides written in Markdown, and everything else just happens magically because we have coding capabilities. So this is, for those of you really old, this is before NPM, right? So I had all of my dependencies committed to Git. Yay! Good! Nothing broke there, almost. But this is all using CSS3, and this is 2012. So it's like all browser prefixed, and it's kind of still working, so I'm very happy. So this is the extreme 10-year makeover edition. Yeah! So we're going to talk about a bit DevX, about developer experience, and about the fact that designing an API is very much about developer experience, and that APIs are not these technical artifacts that extract from your IT infrastructure. They're probably part of your communication strategy and part of your image. And developers, how many of us consider themselves either currently or in past lives as developers? No. How many of you work with developers? Like, okay. And so, and you know, we like to talk about beauty, right? About smells. These are going to be most of the slides I'm going to be skipping over because this was a 40-minute talk. Yeah. And now, so, and part of the idea of, you know, the developer, the API, is a contract with the developers that don't work in the same room as you, right? These are the developers with which you're going to exchange in very intermediated forms, the API form itself, its documentation, its portal, and US developers and people working with developers probably want to have some level of empathy towards them. And this is my personal test because, you know, it's like 3-3-3 rule, basically. How much time does the initial engagement where whatever messaging you're going to try to pass over to the customers needs to take? And I posit that this is ridiculously short amounts of time. Like 3 seconds, this is, you know, page load plus scan, you know, this diagonal scan of a page. Do I understand what this is talking about? And then mucking around, which I suspect my own like attention span to be around 3 minutes, and 30 seconds, and then, you know, getting stuff done. If any of you have used Docker, like in the first year, 2013, and this experience of, this is how Docker happened, right? The API of it, and how much time it takes to engage. So the theorems developers are lazy, but like not normal lazy, really crazy lazy. Like we tend to use the keyboard because we can't be bothered to move the hand up until the mouse. And now, you know, like it's integrated, so it's here, and still like the thumb needs to do like 2 inches. This is horrible. So, and in a way, this talk is a bit different in a way, because at that time, when I did the talk, I was a consultant. And then I did a startup, right? So, and I did try to drink my own Kool-Aid. And this is basically the page behind it. You can try later. When you type in a browser, api.platform.sh, this is what it's going to give you, right? And everybody remembers about REST and HTTP content negotiation. So a human getting to the API gets human content, which is kind of probably good. And this technical URL, right? It's just a technical URL, api.platform.sh, actually serves the documentation and actually tells you, marketing-y, what it is the thing you are going to touch. And you can immediately see on the left that it shows you some of the resources we expose. And potentially just from that, hopefully you understand in what venue of life we are. There are projects, okay, projects. To to which you can add domain. Oh, you can be in production with these projects. And there are repositories. This is something about Git, maybe DevOps, hopefully. And then, we tell you a bit about immediately how to actually use it, how to do the first call. And the theorem, again, is that you're going to get some love if you can pass the test. And, and talk over. No. Legacy. Like this presentation, right? This is legacy code. And again, another theorem here is that what you are currently developing is legacy. This is the old shit. What you're currently developing, this talk is not about the new shit, because your new shit is the old shit, because the future has a horrible tendency of becoming the past. And you can't do anything about it. This is like thermodynamics, the condition, the human condition. And we have systems. Okay, let's and again, and maybe not everybody tells you really, really suck. But even the people that, they're nice, they're being polite. Something sucks, right? Something is not as designed as proper as it should be. Even if, you have a GraphQL meta API and it's like, they're still gonna go, not all the love, let's get more love. And again, the assumption here is that there is anyway something useful behind your system, right? And that the API is a way in which you engage with the exterior world to extract more value from your systems. By the way, exterior world, interior world can be exterior world. The design team doing your PWA is this exterior team. You're probably not in the same room with them every day. And even just and that's, for people like me, like Debian, Python, old stable. Sometimes, when we see the crazy new stuff, you can say, oh, this is crazy new stuff. But if you don't listen to the crazy new stuff, even when it makes absolutely no technical sense, you're still going to be hit by the fact that you don't look cool and shiny. And not looking cool and shiny. So if when I did a 2012 talk, even if you had your most brilliantly made SOAP API, most people didn't, but some did. And it was really great because you get a WSDL file and you can generate classes from it and they're all going to be type safe and it's going to work. It never happened. So I saw one of those. But even if it's the case, in 2012, people seeing a SOAP API would say, there's your old broken people, we're cool, we do REST. And 2022, maybe, oh, you're on RESTy things and you're making so many requests, you should be using GraphQL. So, so one of the ways to do that is, okay, take ugly hog and start paint over, right? Yeah, let's put some lipstick on the pig. It's not really hard to reserialize XML as JSON. You're losing stuff in the way, by the way. It's really interesting because even if your JSON schemas cannot actually express what XML schemas are capable of doing. I'm not telling you to use XML, really. I would never touch XML in my life again. So much suffering. But it's, and you can do the thing where, okay, API consultants told me about the difference between verbs and how CRUD doesn't actually map to post and get, but I'm just gonna make sure that my writes are post and my reads are get. That's a good thing anyway. And I could, and really it's not very hard to put a tool in front of your REST API and have it respond as GraphQL. It's baseline trivial. There are a billion of those. Next. And the thing is that this doesn't actually work very well. And we can always try to apply more layers of makeup, right? And look at all of the things that don't work very well, and let's try correct them one by one. And okay, make sure we don't say 200 error. I don't know how many APIs we've seen like that even these days. And and maybe we remove get user from the URL and we just do it user. How many get user have you seen in URLs? I mean, And maybe, we start generating our documentation directly from code, so at least, it's more or less up to date. And maybe the good kids even actually have the payload schema, so it actually becomes useful. And maybe you put copy-pastable curl in your documentation, if you don't really do. And this is, you read the blogs and you follow the bunch of best practices, and you've probably also cleaned up some technical debt in the way, but still, really. So potentially we've been focusing on the wrong side of the pig, right? So maybe it wasn't the face of it, but whatever's coming from the other side. Look at the lipstick, please. I worked on this. Again, so this is going to be about smell, right? And you're kind of probably getting, if you do the work correctly and you're mimicking whatever good design is, this 333 rule, you're probably feeling, hey, I'm there. Like, people look at my landing page, we'll talk about the landing page, and they figure it out, but when they actually try to use it, something breaks, something doesn't make sense. And often enough, it's going to be about leaky abstractions, right? That's so I'm not going to talk about all the code smells with, but you're exposing potentially the internals or the old form of whatever API was there, and it's still showing through. These weird field names we don't understand. I have one in my API that I won't be able to change ever, where the address is for the street address is thoroughfare. Why? Because it was a standard in 2001, and I'm not gonna change it just because it's ridiculous. Okay, now I'm gonna just code smell. This is if this were PowerPoint, I would have hidden the slides, but this is not PowerPoint, right? This is CSS and JS from the 60s. We can think about these smells as developers. You know what these code smells are, right? In code, you see these envy, Uber objects, all of the magic constants, all of those things. And and we've talked about this a bit. There are things that are immediately this is not designed. 200 error and 404 OK are one of the things that you say, okay. When you see so many parameters that have to do, in the URL, that have to do with something security, anything security, you say, okay, someone super smart security sauce, my developer doesn't trust anything, we're going to do SHA-512, not to see, and you kind of know this is oh my God, let's go away. And, or franglais, when someone didn't actually speak English. So the theory is that APIs actually need design or they will smell. If all you do is emulate the aesthetics, you will not leverage any new efficiencies that are behind the model, because there was an idea there, right? And you can think about REST and GraphQL, right? In a way, right? GraphQL solves, it's a bit like React, weird, solve a single problem, a single local problem, which is, oh my God, my clients are doing too many requests. And potentially, the second problem is the form of the request is not what my client needs, right? It doesn't have all the fields I need, or it has too many fields, so there's just too much data going over the wire. And it's kind of interesting because if all I do is put, my GraphQL on top of my old API, very probably from an internal perspective, there is the same amount of latency that is getting generated, and we're very probably absolutely incapable of leveraging any level of caching. I mean, it's kind of cute. I had a purely cacheable API, so I did a lot of calls, but all of them were cached. And potentially, by the way, there are, and we've talked about this in 2012, very good design patterns you can use in REST APIs that solve the same kind of problem. Google transclusion, you can just transclude documents, and the whole idea behind REST, by the way, the state transfer is by the client, and the client can actually ask the server for the form of the response. But I'm not going to be bitching about GraphQL. So the first thing is that designing an API is exactly like designing anything else. It doesn't start with your technical artifacts. It doesn't start with your object model. It doesn't start with your database tables. It starts with a user. And again, and I'm not saying you don't expose all of these internals, because complexity is evil by itself. Complexity is life, right? Everything is complex, and you've built internal systems that render useful services and therefore are complex. But the API doesn't do that, right? The job of the API is actually to help a user go through a sequence of steps in order to achieve some desirable outcome. And all APIs are going to have at least one single common use case, which is a user is going to be using them for the first time. And now this is a specifically valuable use case, because as a matter of fact, none of the others will probably get discovered if you fail on this one. So how do we start? From the outside in, right? From the first second someone discovers you to the moment in which they are going to be more and more engaged with your system. And it's really about like value, right? Over all the things your internal systems can do, there are probably a couple that are more important, right? There is some level of value, and maybe we can find just one, right? Maybe just one thing your API is going to do. So this is really about thinking about this green field. Even if you have already your V3 of the API, V4 starting from a blank slate and discovering it through user experience. And you kind of want to figure out this critical path to the user experience. And part of it can be compliance, right? All of my clients are in banking. Maybe the first thing in the experience they get is, oh my God, how secure and modern security this API is, even before we talk about anything else your system does. And then, let's choose just one use case and follow this use case, just one user doing something really important, valuable with my system, and try to figure out what are the constraints this user is going to have. We talked about security, authentication. Maybe this is, again, where I put my brain firepower in the beginning. And we look at this first interaction, this first call, and we try to look at these constraints that we are going to have. Potentially, by the way, the first thing we will discover that this single first call makes me, in order to deliver the value, I actually have to do multiple internal calls to do that. I don't have a single object that has this responsibility. This is going to affect the way in which my facade, my API layer, is going to interact with internal systems. Potentially, it's going to mean that this is going to be a big project, because it's not going to be a simple proxy. Potentially, this is going to be a stateful system. We don't know yet, right? We discovered this through discovery. And okay, we got the margarita because we already focused on the user, and we go now back to work. And it's not forcefully a time in which you start writing code, and very clearly not time in which you start generating code. This is not the time in which, so this is the mock API. It can be the mock API, right? You don't have to go into deep implementation here. This needs to stay nimble. This is not where the moment in which you start generating huge amounts of technical debt. Every line of code, let's remember, is legacy. It's already that. And probably we identified just a resource or two, and maybe a method or two, and we start to understand this bridging between that system and whatever legacy means. Maybe this is my GraphQL on top of time's up. I'm already timed up. Okay, I didn't see you. Okay, so I'm gonna, we don't have a talk, people. This was 40 minutes. I'm incredibly ill. Don't bind directly. Serve some human readable content on the root of your API. Go to production. Learn things. Learn more things. Use more tools. Look at the really interesting people from bump.sh, because this is a collaborative sport. This is not a single, yeah, we won yesterday, yeah. And, oh, no, stop, do things again. Go to, no! Yeah, cute, okay. But, just one interesting thing, look at the version number on my API that went live in 2015. This means that it may change, but it is a very strong contract change. When you correctly design an API from the ground up, when there is design thinking coming into it, there is a very good chance you will never have a 1.1, and even more so, 2. Because the basics of your value, unless you're pivoting, right? But if you're the same company and you have the same kind of users, there's a very good chance that's gonna stay. I'm Ori Pekelman, and I love this tweet about, again, something about design thinking and documentation, and that making like platform as a service that supports well a microservice. Use cases, cool. Yeah, thank you, so sorry. Oh, yeah, no, I have to do the last one. Yeah, flying pigs.
Thanks, Ori. Okay. Thanks so much. We did have some flying pigs at the end. That's very good. Any questions for Ori? We have time for one question, I think. Well, maybe the end was a little bit overwhelming for most.
Very cool. It's very cool.
It's very, okay. Any questions?
I'm plugging.
Okay. If we don't have any questions, then thanks again, Ori.
They're just friends. I have no.
Okay. Thank you very much once again.
Marmelade, confiture.
Just throw it into the audience. Please don't. Okay. So thanks, Ori. Do we have our next speaker, Cédric Loumet? Cédric? Oh, I think we would have had 40 minutes. That's a bit disappointing. Okay. Well, last call for Cédric? Okay. Well, I'm terribly sorry in that case. It seems like we have a little bit of free time now, so please come back if you're interested in the rest of the track at 11:40, okay? Or just hang out. See you later.